We have a traditional row crop operation as well as specialty crops. So we're probably, I don't think of ourselves as big, but for a specialty crop operation, I suppose we're probably one of the larger ones in the state. I would guess. I don't know who keeps track of that, but so we sell strawberries in the spring and all the way through pumpkins in the fall, and pretty much something in season throughout between the two. So we really increased our strawberry plantings for next year. They've been incredibly popular, and we just can't seem to raise. Each year we're growing more berries, and we're having more people hear about us and come. So yeah, we stay busy with strawberries. They're an annual system, the way we do it, so we don't keep them over. These were just planted in the last week of August.
Oh, okay.
We've been trying to get our plugs a little earlier. We like to start them a little earlier than we were in the past. In the past, we weren't planting them till about now, mid-September. I think one year we didn't even get our plugs till like maybe the 1st of October, which was really pushing it. But those berries form in the fall, the actual fruit. So say December or so, January, once they're fully dormant and covered for the winter, we can actually take that crown. If you wanted to look at it under either a magnifying glass or maybe even a microscope, you would cut that open and you could find the actual blossoms in there. So when the temperatures get below 70 degrees and the daytime gets below solstice or past solstice, which we just had, as soon as the nights start getting longer than the daylight hours, those berries start to go into reproductive mode. So they're forming their buds. Their cell division goes from vegetative to floral or reproductive. So they form flower buds in the crown, in the main crown that we planted, and then they also form branch crowns. So if you would pull those up in the spring, we'd like to see at least 3 and preferably 5 branch crowns. So if you would pull that plant, it's going to be, the biggest crown is going to be the one we planted this fall. It's going to be thumb-sized or bigger. And then off to the side of that, you'll see smaller, what they call branch crowns. And those will all push out leaves, and then they'll stick out their hand. And if you're familiar with strawberries or think about it when you go to pick them, you have one long stem, and there's like 3 to 5, 6 berries per cluster or hand. So those are all formed this fall. So the more branch crowns we get, the more hands we get. So hence the larger amount of berries. And then we kill these plants as soon as we're done picking them, and then we plant plant pumpkins back. And you'll see some strawberry fields that were picked on this spring that we sprayed and then replanted pumpkins in June. So it lets us use our plastic and our drip irrigation. Pumpkins have a really strong root system. Strawberries are pretty wimpy. They just kind of stay up there in that little mound, and they get about yay big and really don't go too. So by constantly having to water those, we tend to leach some of that fertilizer down lower in the soil profile. So the pumpkins really have an aggressive root system. They go searching, and you can tell, usually it's about the time they start to run, which pumpkin comes up and it's kind of like a little, just a round plant, and then all of a sudden it starts sending out runners. Well, when it starts to run, that usually corresponds with about the time the depth of that root taps in and finds that, and they turn dark green and they just have explosive growth after that. So they're actually recapturing some of the fertilizer that the strawberries may or may not have used and gotten down below what they could reach. So it's a really good system for us to recapture not only our fertilizer, but get to use the cost of the plastic, the installation, the drip tape. We get 2 crops off of it instead of 1, so it cuts our costs in half. The strawberries in this system, we keep all the runners off the strawberries, and you'll see some. I guess we could go out there and I could show you a little bit of this, but they're starting to send out runners now, and which is just a long stem, and at the end of it you'll see a puff of leaf tissue. And then when you turn it over at the bottom, you'll see a little nubbin that starts, and it's roots. So if that was in an open ground field, it would be laying against dirt. and it would start a daughter plant. And that's how strawberries spread. So if you have them in your garden, you could plant them quite a ways apart, and after the first year they spread, and pretty soon, if you don't hose them out or till a path to walk on, they'll take over your whole garden. But anyway, we don't do that. We keep all the energy into that mother plant. And
You
those
get bigger strawberries that way.
Exactly, much bigger strawberries. They're healthier. A lot of these strawberries, when you start to keep them over the second year, you can, and there's people that's tried it. Most of them that's tried it have only done it once and were disappointed with the yield. So you're gonna have increased disease pressure, you're gonna have smaller berries. You don't have any way to contain that plant, so what it does, it puts out too many branch crowns the second year. It's a bigger, robust plant, has all these branch crowns, so you end up with a lot of strawberries, and they're just little bitty
Yeah, that's what
fruit
mine
that
have.
nobody really wants to pick. So
No,
by keeping this an annual system, we have large, really large, like California type berries. We can let them ripen further than a California berry for them to ship, and so the quality is just incredible, and the production is so much more. So it's not cost effective for us to redo that the second year. We have a grower in Illinois. They pull those in midsummer.
Oh, okay.
And then they put that in a 50 cell tray in a little bit of potting soil, and they mist that like every 15 minutes. They cut them and throw them immediately into cold storage so they don't dehydrate and they stay alive. They bring them here. It's in the worst possible time because it's in July, and they put them in those things. They basically have to almost just keep them soaking wet, at least for 3 to 5 days until they start to get a little root, and then they slowly back off the water.
Okay.
So they were all harvested and started as, they need 3 to 6 weeks in a plug tray before the roots are developed enough that you can pull them out and not have it fall apart.
Okay.
So, and we don't do that. We have too much stuff going on, and we're not set up. There's a grower in Illinois. He produced 2.5 million plugs this summer, and he sold out, and he could have sold more, but he said he's physically can't, he just doesn't have room to do any more than 2.5 million. It's really interesting. He gets 26 to 28 cents, so he's doing $500,000 in basically 2 months' time of plugs. So the plugs are expensive. It'll cost, once you have some of your infrastructure in, like your buried irrigation, mains, your fencing and stuff, it gets a little less, but your initial startup will run you about $10,000 an acre to plant an acre of strawberries. So they're pretty pricey to plant.
And what's the revenue off of that?
Oh, off 1 acre, you're basically we would like to shoot for 1 pound per plant. A lot of times it's more like 8/10 because in a U-pick situation, you're gonna have increased loss. So anytime you let the public pick, A, they're gonna eat some, B, the kids are gonna throw some, and C, they do not like to pick their row from here to you to fill their box. They wanna go down at the end because they know there's a better berry down there than there is right here. So you have areas that get overripe. It's difficult to keep them from getting overripe sometimes because public doesn't do a thorough job. So you would like to get it a pound. So we got $3.49 a pound for them. So you get about $3 a plant per plant return on those. So, but there's a myriad of other expenses and risk and a ton of labor.
Yeah.
Our labor bill is astronomical. You wouldn't believe what we spend a year on labor.
So you do have U-pick here, though?
Yes,
Okay.
that's mainly all we do with the strawberries.
Oh, okay.
This year we had some H2A labor, which is foreign guest worker labor,
Yep.
and we picked considerably more than we ever had. In fact, we had a 1 acre patch up here that was all, we never let the public in.
Okay.
But, and we could have sold. We typically don't have much pre-pick because we just don't have the labor to do it. But I have no idea what the demand, what we could sell if we could pick enough. It would be considerably more than we could raise, I would imagine.
And you sell everything here, or you ship it out?
Yes,
or?
no, we don't ship anything. It's all you pick right here.
Perfect.
This year, I've always gone to farmers markets in the past, and this year with the COVID, I chose not to participate in Overland Park Farmer Market. That's really the only one we go to. Farmers markets this year, and anybody that saw my talk last year, well, I'll be redundant here, but farmers markets have really gotten popular in the last 5 to 10 years, especially the last 3 to 5. They're almost a social event now because you can get your donut and a coffee and you can visit with your neighbor. And even if you don't buy anything, it's something you want to get up for and go down and just see what's going on. Well, with COVID, it's crowded. And that's what you remember from the last couple summers. If you've been down to Overland Park in July or August when peaches and watermelon and all that hit, it is elbow to elbow in that place. So when you have that in your mindset, it's like, that sounds like a good place maybe we need to steer clear of. So I'd really like to get Frank's strawberries, and I know he's not coming down there, so we're just gonna pile in the car, come out here. It's something to do. Sunshine, it's wide open space. You know, I feel that's a safer alternative for us. And so with the whole COVID thing, on-farm sales for everybody that I've talked to that does on-farm sales has had a banner summer. They didn't plant enough stuff. In fact, some people didn't plant as much, thinking, I mean, it was really scary. When this thing first hit, we were like, oh my gosh, we got all these strawberries. Man, are we gonna have to watch the birds eat them? Or, but it turned out we had a great year, and everybody I've talked to has been that way. So we hope that some of that, when COVID's over, kind of follows through. And there seems to be a more concern with where does my food come from. And I realize Kansas is not utopia. We can't raise everything that you get at the grocery store in Kansas. Some of it just doesn't grow here. But people are wanting to make a concerted effort to maybe get some of the things that do grow here, find out where they're at and get them local. And then they find out that it's a nice drive. They can come out here on a weekend and they can pick up, you know, all their summer goodies, sweet corn, tomatoes, kind of a one-stop place for fruit and vegetables. And it's a fun trip, and they go home with some good stuff, and they find out a lot of times that when it was on the vine yesterday and picked today, it tastes much better than what was in the grocery store. And it's been in their back room for, 10 days and on the truck for a few days. And so, but anyway, that's kind of a long-winded answer. This is, these beds were in strawberries last year, and you can see what's left of the dead plant here. And then we just plant these with what they call a pole planter. It's just a PVC pipe. The little duck bill pokes a hole. You drop one seed in, you just pull it out and it leaves the seed. So it's real easy if you want a 3-foot, 4-foot, or 5-foot spacing. The strawberries are on foot. So you have the kids just count like 3 plant or 4 plant, depending on the size of the vine. The bigger pumpkins you plant 5 to 6 foot apart. The smaller decorative pumpkins you could plant as close as 3 feet apart. So that's a pretty good system. This is our drip tape. We have a header line that's a 2-inch lay flat. It comes with a riser up there where the white pipe is. We pump all our water out of the pond that you saw up front. So one of the next projects is we're wanting to put in a retail store much larger than what we have, a really big barn, a retail store. So we can do a bakery. Once we have apples, we'll have apples. We can put them in cold storage and keep them at least through Christmas holidays. So you'd be able to come in and buy baked goods and apples, some of that type fall stuff, apple cider.
You're going to do cider?
We have cider for sale here. I'm not going to press my own. It's really expensive to get set up for that. South Baldwin Farms over here at Baldwin has a gorgeous state-of-the-art press. It's brand new. And we've been buying cider from them. It's excellent. We'll probably, as we come more online, we'll have enough apples that we can take ours over there and have them custom press it. but right now we're just buying cider from them.
Are they pasteurized also?
Yes, it's pasteurized, yeah. It has to be pasteurized for anybody else to sell it. I could squeeze fresh cider and sell it on the farm with a disclaimer, and I can do that. But if I was to sell it to a store, sell it to you, and then you took it home and sold it out of your store, I can't do that unless it's pasteurized. So, yeah. UV pasteurization has gotten, it's still expensive, but it's somewhat affordable, and it's much easier and simpler for small time. You can get units that only do like 50 or 100 gallons an hour, or 200. The old heat pasteurization is quite a process, but that's what it takes to make shelf stable. Now this is pasteurized, but it still has to be refrigerated, and you've got 30 days to sell it. You get it used up. It's safe for at least 30 days. Last year we did a big sunflower festival. We planted over 10 acres of them. We had them on 2 different weekends. We planted 5 acres and then another 5, and fortunately they worked out perfect for each weekend. We didn't plant them this summer when we should have because of the COVID. We weren't real sure. We generally plant a couple of these little fields every fall with our pumpkin patch. They'll be open. So wet. We really struggled to get them planted. These I'm hoping in about 2 weeks will be open. Sunflowers, I know they look pretty small, but each week from 1 week to the next they double in height. So in a week or 10 days those will be about shoulder high, and then within 5 days after that they'll have an open flower. These are our apples. They're what they call a tall spindle system. This was developed in Europe, or originally came from that region. It's fairly new in the U.S. It's not brand new, but in the last 6 to 8, 10 years, it's really taken off. It's become very popular. One is because the yields off this type system are tremendous. They'll easily do over 1,000 bushel an acre per year on this system. It's a lot easier to take care of once it's mature. The first couple of years, the downside is that it's terribly expensive. You have all the trellising to put in. Instead of buying like 150 trees per acre for an old style conventional apple, you're buying over 1,500 per acre. So it gets pretty pricey. We'll have about 7,500 trees. With the last of them are coming this fall, and this will totally fill up our orchard, this last trees. So we'll have about 7,500 trees. They're going to run $10+ a piece, so you've got quite a bit of money tied up in here, plus your trellising. We wanted to do something that was unique. We wanted to pull people to our pumpkin patch, so we wanted to offer something that really not too many patches have. There's an orchard at Weston. There's Johnson's over at Belton. They both have this type system. They're about a year. Johnson's, I think, planted theirs 1 year ahead of us. The one at Weston is about 2 years ahead of us. So they're in much more production than we are. But we wanted to set ourselves apart from both those orchards, so we planted a lot of new varieties from the Midwest Apple Improvement Association. And there's stuff that you can't get in the store, at least not yet. I think at some future point you'll see some of them. I'm sure you'll see Evercrisp. They were in Costco this fall. But we wanted to be able to offer a really incredibly good apple that you couldn't get anywhere but here. And so that's what we've kind of focused on. So about 2/3, maybe even 3/4 of our apples are all new varieties that you would have never heard of if I tell you what they are. These trees were a little, it probably wouldn't have hurt these trees to be defruited this year and let them get one more year. They had quite a bit of growth last year, and we cut a lot of that back, and so they developed shorter new limbs, and then we let those fruit, and we probably should have let them develop it. But they got adequate height, and they'll branch out. You can see there's a lot of some new growth. But once they set apples, Apple kind of shuts down the growth of the tree, vegetative and height and everything. It's focused more on making fruit than it is on growing the wood. You can drop the sides down for your ventilation, open the end doors. They'll pick you up a couple, 3 weeks on the front side and a couple, 3 weeks later into the fall. Generally, you can button them up, and if you don't have a hard freeze, you can usually skate by maybe the first light frost or two in the fall. Or you can always put a space heater or something, and we do that in the spring with our tomatoes. We typically plant our tomatoes around the first day of spring, March 20th, somewhere in there, give or take a week. As I get older, I tend to push that back a little bit because I don't like getting up and babysit heaters in the night. But these are actually sweet cherries. We did it one time when we had all 6 of these. We were growing all red slicing tomatoes, and they're a lot like anything else. When you start having more than you can sell and you start selling wholesale, it's really difficult to make much money wholesale, especially when you're on a smaller scale. So we've done a lot of different things. We've grown cauliflower in them. This year we had one. We didn't want to plant tomatoes. We didn't really have any plans for it. It was just going to set empty. And so I took our hired gal, that's kind of my orchard manager, Holly, down. I said, let's go down to Enright's, which they have bedding plants just down the road. And I said, let's just go down there and you can buy whatever you want to put in the house. We'll just go see what we have. So she wanted to do peppers, and they've actually done really well. We harvested an awful lot of peppers out of there. Everything, I mean, tomatoes included, they're looking really tired. We're tired, and some years by now we just quit taking care of them. We've already sold the majority of what we're going to sell out of them. We've got other projects. So a lot of times late in the fall, we just kind of let stuff do their thing and die. But this year we haven't had any trouble getting rid of anything. We haven't had any backlog of tomatoes. Like I said, we got 2 houses that aren't in tomato production. That's helped some. They keep the plants totally dry with plastic over the top. The neat thing is when you roll the sides up and button them up, you can pick a January day and there'll be snow on the ground, but if it's sunny out, it will get really warm in there. In fact, warm enough you'll need to ventilate it, or it gets hot. It's not warm, it's hot. We put a hard 1/2-inch tube with a punched-in emitter for each tomato plant, so that way the whole house gets uniformly watered. If you use drip tape, always the downhill end always gets more water than the uphill end. And these are the original ones, the tubing. We've got this oldest buildings, I think it's 10 or 11 years old. It's still using the same drip tubing that we did when we started it. So, but they stay dry. The leaves don't get wet. Don't have any rain on them. They don't have dirt splashing up on them, so they don't die out halfway through the summer like your tomato plants do in the garden. Very little insect issues. Occasionally we'll have some aphids. If it gets really hot and dry, one of these houses we had some mites in. We had to spray for some spider mites. But other than that, they're pretty idiot proof. We tear everything out in the winter. We go in there and till the soil. Then we lay our ground cover back down. This cherry house is the only one that doesn't have a ground cover. So it keeps all the weeds out. For the building, we'll put our stakes in, we put all our string up, we put our irrigation down. So we're totally done, and we can have our full-time help do something during the winter when otherwise we'd really be hard-pressed to have a job for them. Like I say, if it's 0 out, they can still go in there and work if the building's shut up. So we have that all done. And then all we have to do is plant tomatoes come spring and turn the water on, and it's a pretty effective use of our labor that way. So,
Do you start any of your own tomatoes, or do you buy them?
no, actually all the tomatoes we've grown for the last, I don't know, probably longer than I think, probably 6 or 8 years. I want to say 4 or 5, but I bet it's been 7 or 8 years at least, are grafted tomatoes. So So they would be much like our grafted tree. They have a root stock, and then they slice the vegetative off of that and put whatever variety of tomato you want on top of it. If you like a celebrity, if you like a red goose, whatever your cup of tea is, you can slice it on there. So the root stock is, when you go to pull these out, the first year or two we just did some trials, like half the house grafted, half not. When you go to pull them out, when they're dead in the fall, the tomato comes up, it's got this little root ball kind of around it, a lot of the hair roots break off. You go to pull one of these out, and I mean, you come out of there with like a head-sized basketball of. So I tell people it's like putting them on a turbo. It's like put a turbocharger on your car engine. That's kind of what you do with these. So not only do they gather a lot of soil-borne disease resistance, because that rootstock is disease resistant, it's actually a throwback to a native tomato. That rootstock will actually produce tomatoes, but it's really not anything you'd want to eat. It's in the tomato family, but that's about all you can say for it. But it's real disease resistant, it's real hardy. So your production goes up on whatever scion you put on there, and you get some disease resistance. It works especially well in these tunnels where typically tomatoes generate the most. If you can find a market for all of them, they generate more money than most anything else you can find in there. So this original Quonset, right, this one here that's curved all the way to the ground, doesn't have a straight side. That one, I think, we put up in around 2006, 7. That was the very first one. And it has never had anything but continuous tomatoes in there for probably going on 15 years. We started to have a few issues. That was about the time that Kerry Rivard came on and got through K-State, got us started on grafting. And we get as good a production out of that house as the ones we rotate. So it seems to be working.
What kind of fertilizer do you use on it?
We really don't use any fertilizer. I had livestock in the past, so generally over the course of the winter or spring, where we would feed hay in the roundbale feeders, of course it gets pretty mucky and manure and spilled hay. So in the spring when I'd clean them up, I'd shove them up in a pile, and we'd let that set for a year or two and compost. And then I don't know how many countless loads. We had a small, narrow manure spreader that would fit in there. And we would load the thing up and then till it in. And it's very, very rich soil in these, and I really don't fertilize them. I think the last time, it's probably been 2 years ago since we did any trials with K-State. The last time they took a soil sample out of here, they were still, I mean, like off the charts. So it's very fertile soil. Tomatoes, like a lot of fruit, are about 98% water. So it's really not like you're hauling a lot of fertility out when you harvest your tomatoes. So it's a good question, Mark. Anybody else?
Did you have a great benefit to planting the cherries inside the hydro?
This cherry project is my goof off. I did not plant these with any expectations of making any money. I love fresh sweet cherries. I've tried growing these trees outside and had very dismal results. For any of you know that if you know anything about cherry trees, the majority of cherries in the U.S. are grown in Washington State. They're grown in the eastern part of the state, not the western part of the state. So they're high plains desert. They get 12 inches of rain a year or less. So if it's not watered out there, it dies. And they love that. Two things that causes problems here: high humidity and frequent rainfall in May and June when these ripen. So if you take a ripe thin cherry and it rains on it, that cherry's going to split, and then immediately is unsellable because it's going to immediately start to rot. You pick it the same day and you want to eat it, and it's your own tree, that's great, but you can't sell split cherries. So that, and the fact that they're very susceptible to bacterial canker, and that's also aggravated by high moisture. the tree. Any injury, any nick in the bark, even a limb crotch where it comes off the main trunk, will get moisture in there and it'll start bacterial canker. And it'll eventually kill the tree. It's not a quick death, but it'll just keep spreading. So by putting them in these tunnels, you've alleviated the moisture problem. You basically, the only water they get is what you drip irrigate. So for any of you that aren't familiar with these tunnels, when we shut the water off and let the frost kill these or decide we're just done, and then we'll just let the tomatoes sit in there till whenever we have time to do something with them. So whenever that case may be, after pumpkin season or something, we'll have the guys come in here, they'll cut the string and roll the tomato carcasses out and roll the floor up. And when you do that, you have no rainfall and you have all this sunlight and heat in there, and it is like the driest powder sandbox you can imagine. When you go in there and rototill it, I can take a little tractor mounted rototiller and just bury that thing, and it's just powder. So you basically have a desert environment in these tunnels except for what you water, and that's right up Cherry's alley. So Michigan State has done a lot of work with high tunnel cherries. They do a little differently. This is considered a 4-season high tunnel, which means the plastic stays on year round. A lot of the cherry producers that put them under cover, even in other countries, Spain does a lot of these, a lot of European countries do. They'll have the framework out there in the orchard, and then they'll have plastic that they can pull over it. So when those cherries first start to catch a blush or start to ripen, they'll pull the plastic over and keep them dry until they can get them picked. Then the rest of the year they pull that off there, and they're basically like an outdoor grown tree. So this is a little bit different in that aspect. The trees like it in there so much that they're outgrowing their space. They're supposed to be on a dwarfing rootstock, but they just want to grow in there. So I'm hoping I can keep them somewhat contained. We're going to have to give them a severe haircut this winter. But this is the second summer. So I had maybe 30 flowers in there. We didn't have it shut up or anything. They froze. Well, I say they froze. Actually, I think they probably didn't get pollinated because there were so few flowers. There wasn't enough for me to buy any bees. They need to be pollinated. They need to be cross-pollinated to make fruit. Sweet cherries do. Tart cherries do not. They're self-fertile. But sweet cherries need a pollinator. When you grow them in this type of condition, you'll need to bring in bumblebees, what they call bees in a box. So they're just another commodity. You can get on the phone, you can order a box of bumblebees. So that's what we'll do next year. We need to order them in. About the time you start seeing pink buds, you need to get them right before they open, and then you'll have bumblebees in there.
You don't have any bees? You don't take care of bees here?
Yes, we do. We do. Native bees, honeybees, bumbles, whatever. They don't like those houses. They don't go in there. And the reason is because the sunlight goes through that plastic, and that plastic is designed to try to do away with the shade, so it diffuses that light. So instead of having a direct beam that goes right through a clear plastic, it hits it, and it goes like this. Bees got to see that sun to get their directions. They fly around their hive, and then they take off. And that's how they find their way home. They look at the sun, and they figure out that they came from this when they fly back. So when they get in there, they're lost. And they also don't know how to get out. And the same way with house flies, we get all sorts of insects in there. And they'll just sit up there in the top, and they'll just bounce off the plastic. You'll just hear them, and they'll do that until they die, and then they'll fall on the floor. And the same thing happens with honeybees. But generally, it's pretty rare to find a honeybee in there because something about, they know kind of when they don't like them. So bumblebees will be fine as long as their nest is in there. You buy them in a little box, and that's their nest. So it's a pretty cool little program. We did it when we had raspberries in one of these tunnels. They need to be cross-pollinated, so we buy them. They have a little door. You just open the door, and they fly around in there.
You have to close it all up?
No, they stay. they pretty much stay in there. Or if they leave, they know how to get back. But if you need to like spray, like say we had a mite outbreak in our raspberries, because it's so dry in there, it's a perfect environment for mites. Mites like very dry weather, like hot temperatures. So you just you go out there after dark, you just close the door, all the bees are inside for night. I take the box, carry it up here, set it in the shade, and I can spray if I need to spray. Wait a day, bring the box back in, pull the door open, and then right back where they know they're in the same place and they're happy. So kind of a neat concept. And they don't seem to bother anybody. If you don't mess with them, they just kind of fly around, do their own thing. Raspberries, they were primocane raspberries, so there were almost always blooms in there all summer long. I've never gotten stung. I don't think any of my help did. We let a few people pick, and I think one kid might have got a bumblebee sting, but he reached in and there was a bumblebee right there. They're pretty benign overall. But we have tons of fruit, stuff that we can store like peaches, apples, anything we put in the cooler, or even strawberries when we do pre-picked strawberries. You've always got a certain amount of sort out, something that's got a bruise or a bump or a blemish. And you can only eat so much of that yourself. Even the help can only take so much of it home. You really need to be making it into something, an added value product. And it's perfect for smoothies, fruit drinks, or the fried pies. We have some friends in Porter, Oklahoma, that raise a lot of peaches. They do fried pies, and they do a killer peach ice cream out of a soft serve machine. I've been wanting an ice cream machine for a long time, but I don't have any place to put it.
Just for you, right?
Just for me. I'd weigh 400 pounds if I had an ice cream machine on site. But yeah, there's a limitless amount of things you can do. We've got an excellent gal that works in here. She is an incredible baker. She's won all sorts of baking. She can make a pie like nobody's business.
Wow.
So I'm hoping as she gets maybe a couple more years on her, maybe she's going to slow down a little bit or retire, and then we can get her to work. And when we look for food items for on farm or for agritourism, it's kind of like these donuts. The same way if you've been somewhere that has kettle corn. You can walk by kettle corn if it's in this front store and it's in the bag and it's been there. It's like you don't even look at it. But if you step outside the building and you hear it popping and you smell it and there's a guy over there with a boat paddle doing this, what are you going to buy? You're going to buy some popcorn, aren't you? So I call it an impulse buy. Donuts are the same way. They're an impulse buy. Ice cream, there's a myriad of concoctions of the different ice creams. We did ice cream here. I think the very first year we picked strawberries here at this farm. We only had this patch that size, and we set up a tent here, and we bought ice cream from the dairy up north of Kansas City, Chateau. So we bought ice cream. We called them. They said sure. Their boy had been down here. He lives in Olathe, actually, one of them that does their marketing. So he'd been out several times. So we called him and said, hey, can we source it? Sure, we'd be glad to. So we thought, okay, maybe we'll buy 50 gallon, or I don't even remember what we bought, 30 or 40, 50 gallon, and we'll try it. If nothing else, we've got freezer space, we'll keep it, and eventually get rid of it. We went through all of it day one. We opened at generally where you pick is from 9 to 1. We opened from 9 and until 1, after about 1:30. I don't think there was ever a time when there wasn't a line of people waiting and we did strawberry sundaes. So it's just something about when you come out to the farm and you see something like that. It doesn't matter if you're hungry or not, you're gonna buy it. So we try to stay with, and those happen to be high markup items, and they're premium priced items. So ice cream, the kettle corn, there isn't 25 cents worth of expense in a big old bag of kettle corn. But if you're smelling it and watching that guy stir it with a boat paddle, you're going to pay $5 for a big bag of it, and you're going to have it all eaten by the time you get home. So. And the thing that hurts us now is this building's not big enough to really do us any good. It's very congested in there. It's not really big enough to sell out of. So it's hard to maintain a retail face. The biggest trouble is right now we're open weather dependent. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't always watch our Facebook close enough to know the days that we're closed because of inclement weather. And so we get people dragged out here. And I feel bad, but it's like there's not much I can do. I really wish you could have called or you could have looked at the Facebook.
The information is there for them to find.
It is. But if we had a larger store, we could cut down a lot on our help. Because right now, when we're doing this drive-through in the market here, it takes a lot of help. Our labors went up tremendously this year. But we can have more of a 8 to 5. We can be here every day, rain or shine. We've got plenty. If we're raining, you may not pick, but you can come inside the store. We'll have bigger coolers. We'll have more storage. We'll be able to keep more inventory on hand. We'll also be able to add some increased baked goods or possibly ice cream. That kind of thing. So we're excited. Hopefully looking to get that started here shortly.